The tears streamed down Theresa Lockhart's face as she stared at the departing train, the black smoke billowing into the clear Wyoming sky like her shattered dreams. Her wedding dress, once pristine white, was now stained with dust from the platform, the delicate lace veil hanging limply from her trembling fingers. She had been abandoned left at the altar, or rather, the train station as her fiancé departed for California without her, leaving only a hastily scrawled note explaining he couldn't go through with their marriage. "Tears won't bring him back, madam," came a deep voice from behind her. Theresa whirled around, coming face to face with a tall man whose face was partially obscured by the wide brim of his worn leather hat. His boots were scuffed from miles of riding, and his duster bore the telltale signs of life on the trail. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, clear blue and filled with a gentleness that contradicted his rugged appearance. "Your journey ends in my arms," he said softly, holding out a handkerchief. She took it hesitantly, her voice barely above a whisper. "What did you say?" "I said your tears won't help, madam, and whatever journey you thought you were taking today has ended." He gestured to the disappearing train. "Name's Jackson O'Malley. Most folks call me Jack." Theresa dabbed at her eyes, the reality of her situation crashing down around her. "Theresa Lockhart," she managed, "and I don't know what I'm supposed to do now." It was the spring of 1874, and the small town of Sweetwater Junction, Wyoming Territory, wasn't kind to women alone, especially those with nowhere to go and no means to support themselves. Theresa had sold everything to follow her fiancé west, and now she was stranded, funds depleted from the expensive train ticket and wedding preparations. "You got family here?" Jack asked, keeping a respectful distance. "No, I was heading to San Francisco to be married." "Thomas," her voice caught, "he said he'd send for me when he was settled, but he was on that train. He left me this." She held out the crumpled note, then pulled it back, too embarrassed to share its contents with a stranger. Jack nodded, understanding without needing to see the words. "You got a place to stay tonight?" "No," she admitted, looking around at the nearly empty platform. The station manager was already locking up, casting impatient glances in her direction. "There's a decent boarding house run by Mrs. Peterson 2 streets over. I can escort you there if you'd like." His offer was simple, without any hint of ulterior motive. Just a gentleman helping a lady in distress. Theresa hesitated. Everything inside her screamed caution. A woman alone accepting help from a strange man was scandalous at best, dangerous at worst. But what choice did she have? "Thank you, Mr. O'Malley. I would appreciate that." Jack picked up her trunk with ease, the muscles in his arms tensing beneath his shirt. "It's just Jack, madam, and it's no trouble." As they walked through the dusty streets of Sweetwater Junction, Theresa was painfully aware of the curious stares from townsfolk. A woman in a wedding dress walking with a cowboy was hardly an everyday sight. "Been in town long?" Jack asked, breaking the uncomfortable silence. "Just arrived yesterday. I stayed at the hotel by the station last night." She glanced down at her dress. "I was supposed to change on the train, start my new life as Mrs. Whitman." The name tasted bitter on her tongue. "Well, Sweetwater's not San Francisco, but it's a growing town. Got opportunity for those willing to work." "I don't know what I could possibly do here," Theresa admitted, fighting back fresh tears. "I was a schoolteacher back in Boston, but I doubt there's need for one here." Jack chuckled softly. "You'd be surprised, madam. Town's been looking for a schoolteacher for months. Current one's expecting a baby, wants to retire to full-time motherhood." For the first time since the train had pulled away, Theresa felt a flicker of hope. Truly. "Mayor's office is there on Main Street." Jack nodded toward a white building with a small bell tower. "You might want to pay him a visit tomorrow after you've had a chance to rest and—" He gestured vaguely at her wedding attire. They arrived at a neat 2-story building with window boxes full of spring flowers. A sign reading "Peterson Boarding House" hung above the door. "Mrs. Peterson's fair with her rates, and she keeps a clean house," Jack said, setting down the trunk. "I can come by tomorrow, see if you need any help getting settled." Theresa looked at the cowboy, really looked at him for the first time. He was handsome in a weathered way, with laugh lines around his eyes and a strong jaw covered in stubble. His clothes were well worn but clean, and despite his rough exterior, there was something undeniably gentle about him. "Why are you helping me?" she asked suddenly. Jack touched the brim of his hat. "My ma raised me to believe a man should never leave a lady in distress. Especially not one who's had her heart broken." Before Theresa could respond, the door to the boarding house opened, revealing a plump woman with graying hair and kind eyes. "Jackson O'Malley, what are you doing standing on my porch when you could be inside where it's warm?" The woman's eyes traveled to Theresa, widening slightly at the sight of her wedding dress. "And who might this be?" "Mrs. Peterson, this is Miss Theresa Lockhart. She's in need of a room." "Miss Lockhart, this is Mrs. Margaret Peterson, finest boarding housekeeper in the territory." Mrs. Peterson's expression softened. "Well, don't just stand there, child. Come in, come in. You look like you could use a hot meal and a sympathetic ear." As Jack tipped his hat and turned to leave, Theresa caught his sleeve. "Thank you, Mr. O'Malley, Jack. I don't know what I would have done." "No need for thanks, Miss Lockhart. I'll check on you tomorrow if that's all right." She nodded, watching as he strode away, his tall figure silhouetted against the setting sun. For a moment, Theresa felt a strange sensation in her chest, not the crushing despair of abandonment, but something lighter, something like curiosity. Mrs. Peterson ushered her inside, clucking sympathetically. "Let's get you out of that dress, dear. Then you can tell me what brings a Boston bride to Sweetwater Junction all alone." The boarding house was warm and smelled of fresh bread and cinnamon. For the first time since reading Thomas's note, Theresa allowed herself to breathe. Maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the end of her journey after all. The next morning, Theresa woke to sunlight streaming through lace curtains. For a blissful moment, she forgot her circumstances, then reality crashed back. She was alone in Wyoming territory, abandoned by her fiancé, with nothing but a trunk full of clothes and dwindling savings. After washing and dressing in a simple blue calico dress thankfully packed in her trunk for the journey west, she made her way downstairs. Mrs. Peterson was already in the kitchen, frying bacon and flipping hot cakes. "Good morning, dear. Sleep well?" The older woman smiled warmly. "Better than I expected," Theresa admitted, accepting the cup of coffee Mrs. Peterson offered. "Thank you for taking me in last night." "Nonsense. Any friend of Jack O'Malley's is welcome here." Mrs. Peterson set a plate of food before her. "He's a good man, that one. Been through his share of hardships, but never lost his kindness." Theresa's curiosity was piqued. "You've known him long," since he was knee-high to a grasshopper. "His father worked the silver mines until the cave-in of '58. After that, it was just Jack and his mother, God rest her soul." Mrs. Peterson crossed herself. "He was just 16 when she passed, but he stepped up, took over their small ranch, built it into something respectable." Theresa picked at her food, digesting this information. "He mentioned the town needs a schoolteacher." "Oh, yes. Mrs. Holloway's due in July, and the town council's been in a state trying to find someone suitable. Most qualified ladies don't fancy moving to a frontier town." Mrs. Peterson's eyes twinkled. "You said you taught in Boston." "Yes, for 3 years at the Arden Street School for Girls." "Well then, you should absolutely speak with Mayor Tanner today. The schoolhouse has been sitting empty since term ended 2 weeks ago. New session starts after planting's done, around mid-May." Hope bloomed in Theresa's chest. Teaching was something familiar, something she loved. If she could secure the position, perhaps she could build a life here, not the one she'd planned, but a life nonetheless. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Mrs. Peterson hurried to answer it, returning moments later with Jack O'Malley in tow. He'd changed from yesterday's trail-worn clothes into a clean shirt and vest, though he still wore the same scuffed boots and hat. "Morning, Miss Lockhart," he said, removing his hat. "Hope I'm not intruding on your breakfast." "Not at all," Theresa replied, suddenly conscious of her hastily pinned hair. "Please join us." Jack sat at the table, accepting coffee from Mrs. Peterson. "Thought I might escort you to the mayor's office if you're still interested in that teaching position." "I am, thank you." "That's very kind of you." Mrs. Peterson bustled around, serving Jack breakfast and refilling Theresa's coffee. "Jack's been helping the mayor with the new schoolhouse addition. They've added a proper library room. Town's growing. Jack explained between bites. Lot of families moving in with the railroad expansion. Council figured we needed a proper school if we want to keep them. Theresa found herself warming to the idea of teaching in this frontier town. In Boston, she'd been one of dozens of teachers at a prestigious academy. Here, she could truly make a difference. After breakfast, they set out for the mayor's office. Sweetwater Junction looked different in the morning light, a bustling town with merchants opening shops, wagon teams hauling goods, and children running errands for their parents. It's livelier than I expected, Theresa admitted as they walked. Railroad changed everything, Jack replied. Used to be just a trading post and a few hardy souls. Now we've got a hotel, 3 saloons, a dressmaker's shop, and even talk of a proper theater. And a school, Theresa added with a smile. And a school, Jack agreed, returning her smile with a warm one of his own. Mayor Tanner was a portly man with a magnificent mustache and an effusive manner. He nearly leaped from his chair when Jack introduced Theresa as a Boston schoolteacher. Miss Lockhart, what a providential arrival. We've been advertising back east for months. He pumped her hand enthusiastically. When can you start? The interview that followed was more formality than assessment. Mayor Tanner was clearly desperate to fill the position, and Theresa's credentials were impressive by frontier standards. By noon, she had been officially hired as Sweetwater Junction schoolteacher with a modest salary, a small house behind the schoolhouse, and the promise of school supplies arriving on next week's train. The teacher's house needs some work, Mayor Tanner admitted as they concluded their business. Been empty since old Mr. Pembroke left last year, roof leaks a bit and the stove's temperamental. I can help with that, Jack offered. Got some time before spring roundup starts. Theresa began to protest, but Jack waved her off. Consider it a welcome gift from the town. Can't have our new schoolmarm living in disrepair. Outside the mayor's office, Theresa's head was spinning with the rapid change in her circumstances. 24 hours ago, she'd been preparing to board a train as a bride-to-be. Now she was a schoolteacher in a frontier town with a house of her own and a job starting in 3 weeks. Would you like to see the schoolhouse? Jack asked, leading her down the main street. It's not far. The schoolhouse stood on a gentle rise at the edge of town, a simple clapboard building with a bell tower and freshly painted white trim. Behind it was a smaller structure that Theresa assumed was her new home. It's charming, she said, genuinely pleased as they approached. Jack produced a key. Mayor gave me this when he heard I'd be showing you around, said you might want to see inside. The schoolroom was larger than Theresa had expected, with rows of desks facing a teacher's desk on a raised platform. Bookshelves lined one wall, though they were sadly empty. Large windows allowed plenty of light, and a pot-bellied stove stood ready for winter heating. What do you think? Jack asked, watching her reaction closely. It's perfect, Theresa breathed, already imagining the room filled with children. How many students are there? About 30, ages 6 to 16. Some only come when farm work allows, especially the older boys. Jack ran a hand along a desktop. They're good kids mostly, just need a firm hand and some patience. They moved to the small house behind the school. It was indeed in need of repair. The roof had several missing shingles, the porch steps sagged, and inside everything was covered in a layer of dust. But it had 2 rooms, a small kitchen with a pump for water, and even a tiny garden plot out back. It's more than I expected, Theresa said honestly, running her finger along a windowsill thick with dust. It's fixable, Jack assured her. I'll bring some of my ranch hands over tomorrow. We'll have it shipshape before you know it. Theresa turned to him, overwhelmed by his kindness. Why are you doing all this for me? You don't even know me. Jack was quiet for a moment, his eyes searching hers. Sometimes life takes unexpected turns, Miss Lockhart. Yesterday, you thought you were heading to San Francisco as a bride. Today, you're becoming Sweetwater's schoolmarm. Who knows what tomorrow might bring? There was something in his voice, a hint of shared experience that made Theresa wonder about his own unexpected turns in life. Call me Theresa, please, she said softly. And thank you, Jack, for everything. His smile reached his eyes, crinkling the corners. "You're welcome, Theresa. Welcome to Sweetwater Junction." As they walked back to the boarding house, Theresa felt a strange sense of peace settling over her. The pain of Thomas's betrayal was still fresh, but alongside it was growing something new, a sense of possibility, of a future she hadn't imagined but might come to embrace. And walking beside her was a man unlike any she'd known in Boston, a cowboy with kind eyes and strong hands who'd appeared just when she needed someone most. True to his word, Jack arrived the next morning with 3 ranch hands. For the next week, they worked on Theresa's little house, replacing shingles, fixing the sagging porch, patching holes in the walls, and giving everything a fresh coat of whitewash. They repaired the temperamental stove, replaced cracked window panes, and even built bookshelves for her personal collection. Theresa spent her days helping where she could, cleaning, arranging furniture donated by townsfolk, and planting a small vegetable garden with seeds Mrs. Peterson provided. In the evenings, she worked on lesson plans and inventoried the meager school supplies, making lists of what she would need to order. Word spread quickly about the new schoolteacher, and Theresa found herself welcomed into the community. Mrs. Holloway, the retiring teacher, visited with armloads of notes and advice. Parents stopped by to introduce themselves and their children. The ladies' auxiliary brought household items, curtains, linens, pots, and pans to help her settle in. And each day, Jack was there, working alongside his men, fixing whatever needed attention. Theresa found herself looking forward to his arrival each morning, enjoying their conversations as they worked side by side. "You never told me about your ranch," she said one afternoon as they painted her kitchen cupboards. Jack dipped his brush carefully. "Not much to tell. Started with 20 acres and a few head of cattle after my mother passed. Now it's up to 2,000 acres and a decent herd. Nothing fancy, but it's home." "It sounds wonderful," Theresa said sincerely. "I grew up in the city. All those open spaces must be magnificent." "They can be," Jack agreed, a faraway look in his eyes, "when the sun rises over the eastern ridge and paints the whole valley gold. There's nothing like it in the world." "I'd like to see that someday," Theresa said without thinking. Jack's eyes met hers, something unspoken passing between them. "I'd like to show it to you." The moment stretched, filled with possibility, until one of the ranch hands called for Jack's help with the back door's stubborn hinges. As moving day approached, Theresa found herself torn between excitement for her new beginning and unexpected reluctance to leave the boarding house. Mrs. Peterson had become a friend and confidante, and Theresa knew that once she moved into the teacher's house, she would see less of Jack. The repairs were nearly complete, and spring roundup would soon take him away to the far reaches of his ranch for weeks. The night before she was to move, Theresa sat on the boarding house porch, watching the sunset paint the western sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. The door opened behind her, and Jack stepped out, hat in hand. "Mind if I join you?" he asked. "Please do." She shifted to make room on the bench. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sky darken and the first stars appear. "Big day tomorrow," Jack finally said. "Everything's ready at the house." "Thanks to you and your men," Theresa acknowledged. "I don't know how to repay such kindness." Jack shook his head. "No need. Besides, I had selfish reasons." She turned to look at him, eyebrows raised in question. "Town needs a good teacher," he explained with a small smile. "I've got nephews who will be in your class come fall. My sister Julia's boys, 7 and 9, wild as jackrabbits." "I didn't know you had family in town," Theresa said, surprised. "Julia lives about 5 miles out at her husband's farm. They don't make it to town often, especially during planting season." He twirled his hat in his hands, but that's not the only selfish reason. Theresa's heart quickened. "Oh, I've enjoyed getting to know you, Theresa, more than I expected to." His voice was low, sincere. "I know you've been through a difficult time, and the last thing you need is complications, but I'd like to call on you properly once you're settled." The declaration hung in the air between them. Theresa's mind raced. It had been less than 2 weeks since Thomas had abandoned her. Was she ready to consider another man's interest? Yet there was something about Jack, his quiet strength, his unwavering kindness, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled that touched her heart in ways Thomas never had. "I'd like that," she said finally, her voice soft but sure. Jack's smile was worth any uncertainty she felt. "I'll be gone for roundup soon, couple of weeks, maybe 3, but when I get back." He left the sentence unfinished, full of promise. "I'll be here," Theresa assured him, "teaching children and trying not to burn down my new kitchen." Jack laughed, the sound warm in the evening air. "You'll do fine. Mrs. Peterson says you're a quick study with the cook stove." They talked a while longer about the upcoming school term, about Jack's ranch, about the books Theresa had brought from Boston. As the night grew cooler, Jack reluctantly stood to leave. "Early start tomorrow," he explained. "I'll bring the wagon for your trunk around 8, if that suits." "That's perfect," Theresa replied, standing as well. In the soft glow of the porch lantern, Jack looked at her with an expression that made her breath catch. For a moment she thought he might kiss her, but he simply took her hand and pressed it gently. "Good night, Theresa, sweet dreams." "Good night, Jack." As she watched him walk away, Theresa realized that for the first time since arriving in Sweetwater Junction, she was looking forward to tomorrow not just as a distraction from heartbreak, but as the beginning of something new and potentially wonderful. Moving day dawned clear and bright. Jack arrived promptly at 8 with his wagon, and together with Mrs. Peterson's help, they loaded Theresa's trunk and the various household items she'd accumulated during her stay. "Now remember," Mrs. Peterson fussed, "you're to come for Sunday dinner every week. No arguments. A young woman shouldn't have to cook for herself on the Lord's Day." "Yes, madam," Theresa agreed, hugging the older woman tightly. "Thank you for everything." The ride to her new home was short but pleasant, with Jack pointing out buildings and businesses she hadn't yet visited. When they arrived, Theresa was touched to see a small gathering of townsfolk waiting to welcome her: the mayor and his wife, several school board members, and a few parents with their children. "We wanted to make sure you felt at home," Mayor Tanner explained, presenting her with a basket of preserves, bread, and fresh eggs. "Sweetwater looks after its own." The morning passed in a flurry of activity: unpacking, arranging furniture, accepting small gifts from her new neighbors. By noon, most of the well-wishers had departed, leaving just Theresa and Jack to finish settling her belongings. "It's really starting to feel like home," Theresa said, surveying the main room with satisfaction. Her books lined the shelves Jack had built, her mother's quilt brightened the small bed, and the curtains Mrs. Peterson had sewn fluttered gently in the spring breeze. "Just needs one more thing," Jack said, reaching into his saddlebag. He pulled out a small package wrapped in brown paper and string. "What's this?" Theresa asked, surprised. "Just a housewarming gift, nothing fancy." She unwrapped it carefully to find a hand-carved wooden sign that read "Miss Lockhart's Schoolhouse" in elegant lettering, surrounded by carved wildflowers. "Jack, it's beautiful," she breathed, running her fingers over the smooth wood. "Did you make this?" He nodded, a hint of color touching his cheeks. "Winter evenings get long at the ranch. Took up carving to pass the time. I'll hang it above the schoolhouse door," Theresa decided. "It's perfect." Their eyes met, and in that moment, Theresa felt something shift between them, a deepening of the connection that had been growing since that first day at the train station. Jack cleared his throat. "I should probably get going. Cattle won't round themselves up. When do you leave?" Theresa asked, suddenly anxious about his absence. "Day after tomorrow at first light. We'll be working the North Range first, then moving east." He hesitated. Would you allow me to take you to dinner at the hotel tomorrow night, sort of a farewell before roundup?" "I'd like that very much," Theresa replied, her heart quickening. Jack's smile was worth any risk to her still healing heart. "I'll call for you at 6 then." After he left, Theresa hung her new sign carefully above her desk, her fingers tracing the carved letters. In less than 2 weeks, her life had changed completely, from abandoned bride to independent schoolteacher, from heartbroken to something else, something hopeful. The next evening, Theresa dressed with care in her best blue silk dress, one she'd packed for her honeymoon but never worn. Her hair was arranged in a simple but elegant style, with a few curls framing her face. When Jack knocked at her door precisely at 6, she felt a flutter of nerves that had nothing to do with her recent heartbreak. He stood on her porch in a clean black suit, his usually unruly hair tamed and his hat in his hands. For a moment they simply stared at each other, both a little surprised by the transformation from their work clothes. "You look beautiful," Jack said finally, his voice sincere. "Thank you." "You clean up rather nicely yourself," Theresa replied with a smile. The Sweetwater Hotel dining room was the finest establishment in town, with white tablecloths, silver cutlery, and a French chef who had come west seeking gold but found his fortune in the kitchen instead. Heads turned as Jack escorted Theresa to a corner table, but neither paid much attention to the curious stares. Over a dinner of roast beef, spring vegetables, and chocolate cake, they talked more freely than ever before. Jack told stories of growing up in the territory, of learning to ride before he could properly walk, of his dreams for his ranch. Theresa shared memories of Boston, her love of teaching, and her hopes for the Sweetwater School. "Did you always want to be a rancher?" she asked as they lingered over coffee. Jack considered the question. "No, actually. When I was a boy, I wanted to be a lawman like my uncle, thought there was nothing more noble than bringing order to the frontier." He smiled ruefully. "Then I grew up and realized the land was what I truly loved. There's something about working with the seasons, about building something that will last." "I understand," Theresa said. "Teaching is like that for me, helping shape young minds, watching understanding dawn. There's nothing quite like it." "We're both builders then," Jack observed. "Just of different things." The evening passed too quickly, and soon they were walking back to Theresa's house under a star-filled sky. Jack offered his arm and she took it, feeling the solid strength of him beside her. At her door, Jack seemed reluctant to say goodnight. "I'll be gone 3 weeks, maybe 4 if the weather turns," he said, still holding her hand. "Would it be all right if I wrote to you?" "I'd like that very much," Theresa replied. "I'd like to write to you as well." Jack's eyes held hers, warm in the lamplight. "Theresa, I know it's soon. I know you came here with other plans, other dreams, but I want you to know that He paused, seeming to search for the right words. "I'm very glad you stayed in Sweetwater." Theresa felt a warmth spread through her that had nothing to do with the spring night. "So am I, Jack." He leaned forward slowly, giving her every chance to step away. Instead, Theresa tilted her face up to his. The kiss was gentle, questioning at first, then deepening as she responded. His hands came up to frame her face, tender and careful, as if she were something infinitely precious. When they finally parted, both a little breathless, Jack rested his forehead against hers. "I've been wanting to do that since I saw you at the train station," he admitted, "even when I was crying in my wedding dress." Theresa teased, her heart light despite the reference to that painful day. "Especially then," Jack replied, his thumb gently tracing her cheekbone. "You looked so brave, standing there with your heart broken but your chin high. I knew right then you were someone special." They shared one more kiss before Jack reluctantly stepped back. "I should go, early start tomorrow." "Be safe," Theresa said, suddenly anxious about the dangers of Roundup. She'd heard about stampedes, injuries, the unpredictable spring weather in the high country. "I will," he promised, "and I'll be thinking of you every day." As she watched him walk away, Theresa touched her lips, still feeling the warmth of his kiss. 2 weeks ago, she had thought her heart permanently damaged by Thomas's abandonment. Now she wondered if perhaps that pain had simply cleared the way for something truer, deeper, and far more real than what she had lost. The next 3 weeks passed in a flurry of activity for Theresa. The school term was set to begin, and there was much to prepare. She organized books, wrote lesson plans, and met with parents to discuss their children's educational needs. In the evenings, she would sit at her desk and write long letters to Jack, telling him about her day, her hopes for the school, and how much she missed his company. His letters came sporadically, delivered by ranch hands making supply runs to town. They were sometimes brief, just a few lines scrawled after a long day's work, but always heartfelt. He told her about the roundup, the spring calves, the wildflowers covering the high meadows. Each letter ended the same way, "Counting the days until I see you again. Yours, Jack." As May approached, Theresa prepared for her first day of teaching. The The school board had scheduled a small ceremony to introduce her to the community, and she found herself both excited and nervous. What if the children didn't respect her authority? What if the parents found her Eastern methods too progressive? The night before school was to begin, Theresa was sitting on her porch, reviewing her lessons one last time when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Looking up, her heart leaped at the sight of Jack riding toward her house, silhouetted against the setting sun. She stood as he dismounted, unable to contain her smile. "Jack, I wasn't expecting you back for days yet." He crossed the yard in long strides, his own smile matching hers. "Finished early. Good weather, good crew." He stopped at the bottom of her porch steps, suddenly seeming unsure. "Hope it's all right, me stopping by without warning." "It's more than all right," Theresa assured him, descending the steps. "I've missed you." Jack's hesitation vanished. He closed the distance between them, gathering her in his arms. Their kiss was less tentative than before, filled with the longing of weeks apart. "I've thought of nothing but you," Jack murmured against her hair when they finally broke apart. "Every sunrise, every sunset, every moment in between." Theresa leaned into his embrace, breathing in the scent of him leather, pine, and open air. "Your letters kept me company. I read them every night." Jack looked down at her, his expression suddenly serious. "Theresa, I know we haven't known each other long, and I know you came to Sweetwater with a different future in mind, but these weeks away, they've made one thing very clear to me." Her heart quickened at his tone. "What's that?" "That I'm falling in love with you." The words were simple, direct, like the man himself. "I don't expect you to feel the same, not yet, but I wanted you to know where I stand." Theresa's breath caught. It was soon, too soon, by any reasonable standard. She had been engaged to another man less than 2 months ago. Yet her feelings for Jack had grown with each passing day, each letter, each memory of his kindness and strength. "Jack," she began, her voice soft, "when Thomas left me at that train station, I thought my heart was broken beyond repair. I couldn't imagine ever trusting anyone again." She reached up to touch his face, feeling the stubble beneath her fingertips. "But you've shown me what real caring looks like, what real strength is." She took a deep breath, knowing that what she was about to say would change everything. "I'm falling in love with you too." "I know it's soon, but it's true." The joy that spread across Jack's face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. He lifted her off her feet, spinning her in a circle before setting her gently back down. "You've made me the happiest man in Wyoming territory," he declared, his voice husky with emotion. They spent the evening on her porch, talking late into the night. Jack told her about the roundup, about the foal born to his favorite mare, about his plans for expanding the ranch's operations. Theresa shared her nervousness about the first day of school, her ideas for teaching children of different ages and abilities, her hopes for building a real library for the town. When the night grew cool, Jack reluctantly rose to leave. "You need your rest, big day tomorrow. Will you be there?" "At the ceremony?" Theresa asked, walking him to his horse. "Wouldn't miss it for the world," Jack promised, swinging into the saddle. "I'll be the one in the back row, looking prouder than any parent." Theresa slept little that night, her mind filled with thoughts of Jack's declaration and the challenges of the day ahead. By dawn, she was up and dressed in her most professional attire, a high-necked navy dress with white collar and cuffs, her hair neatly pinned beneath a small hat. The schoolhouse was already filling with families when she arrived. Children in their Sunday best fidgeted on benches while parents chatted in hushed tones. Mayor Tanner stood at the front of the room, ready to make the introduction. Theresa scanned the crowd, her heart lifting when she spotted Jack at the back, just as he'd promised. He stood taller than most, his hat in his hands, and when their eyes met, he gave her an encouraging nod. The ceremony was brief but warm. Mayor Tanner introduced Theresa with effusive praise for her Eastern education and teaching experience. Parents came forward to welcome her, and children presented her with small gifts, wildflower bouquets, a polished apple, handmade bookmarks. When the formal proceedings ended and families began to disperse, Jack made his way to her side. "You were wonderful," he said quietly. "Those children are lucky to have you." "Thank you for being here," Theresa replied, conscious of the curious glances from departing parents. It means more than I can say. Miss Lockhart, Mayor Tanner interrupted, approaching with a plump woman in an elaborate hat. Allow me to introduce Mrs. Alina Harrington, president of the Ladies' Aid Society. She's been instrumental in raising funds for our school library. As Theresa engaged in polite conversation with Mrs. Harrington, she was acutely aware of Jack standing patiently nearby, waiting for her attention to be free again. It struck her then how seamlessly he had become part of her life, how natural his presence felt beside her. The days that followed fell into a pleasant rhythm. Theresa taught during the day, growing more confident with each lesson. The children proved eager to learn, and even the older boys who had initially tested her authority soon came to respect her firm but fair approach. In the evenings, Jack would often ride over from his ranch, sometimes bringing fresh vegetables from his garden or meat from a recent hunt. They would prepare dinner together in Theresa's small kitchen, then sit on the porch talking until the stars came out. On Sundays, they attended church together, followed by dinner at Mrs. Peterson's boarding house. As spring deepened into summer, their relationship grew along with Theresa's roots in Sweetwater Junction. Jack taught her to ride, laughing at her initial clumsiness but praising her determination. She introduced him to the poetry of Tennyson and Wordsworth, reading aloud on lazy Sunday afternoons while he worked on his wood carvings. One evening in late June, Jack arrived at her door with a basket and a mysterious smile. "Put on your riding boots," he instructed. "I want to show you something." Intrigued, Theresa complied. Jack helped her mount his gentle mare, then swung up behind her. They rode out of town, following a winding trail that climbed into the foothills east of Sweetwater. "Where are we going?" Theresa asked as they ascended. "You'll see," Jack replied, his arms secure around her waist as he guided the horse. After about an hour's ride, they crested a ridge and Jack drew the horse to a halt. Below them stretched a valley painted golden by the setting sun, with a silver ribbon of river winding through it. In the distance, cattle grazed peacefully on lush grass, and beyond them, a cluster of buildings marked what Theresa assumed was Jack's ranch. "It's breathtaking," she said, leaning back against his chest. "This is my favorite spot on the whole ranch," Jack told her, his breath warm against her ear. "I come here to think, to plan, to dream." He dismounted and helped her down, then spread a blanket on a flat rock overlooking the valley. From his basket, he produced a bottle of wine, 2 glasses, bread, cheese, and sweet pastries from the hotel bakery. As they ate and drank, watching the sun sink lower, Theresa felt a sense of perfect contentment. This land that had seemed so foreign to her just months ago now felt like home, and the man beside her was a large part of the reason why. "Penny for your thoughts," Jack said, noticing her contemplative expression. "I was just thinking about how differently my life has turned out than I planned," Theresa admitted. "If Thomas hadn't left me at that station, I'd be in San Francisco now, probably miserable without even knowing why." Jack took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "Do you ever regret it, coming to Sweetwater instead?" "Not for a moment," Theresa replied honestly. "I've found purpose here, community, and," she met his eyes, "something I never expected to find again. Love." Jack's expression softened. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "I've been carrying this around for weeks, waiting for the right moment," he said, his voice uncharacteristically nervous. "I think this might be it." Theresa's breath caught as he opened the box to reveal a simple gold ring set with a small, perfect diamond. "Theresa Lockhart," Jack said, taking her hand, "I know you came to Wyoming to be someone else's bride, but I'm hoping you'll consider becoming mine instead." His blue eyes were earnest in the fading light. "I love you. I want to build a life with you here on this land, in this community we both love. Will you marry me?" Tears filled Theresa's eyes, but unlike the ones she'd shed at the train station, these were born of joy, not sorrow. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes, Jack O'Malley, I will marry you." Jack slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that left her breathless. When they finally broke apart, the first stars were appearing in the darkening sky. "When?" Jack asked, his forehead resting against hers. How soon can you be my wife? Theresa laughed, happiness bubbling up inside her. The school term ends in August. Would a September wedding give us enough time to prepare? I'd marry you tomorrow if I could, Jack replied, but September sounds perfect. Just promise me one thing, anything? His eyes twinkled with mischief. No train stations involved. I've developed a superstition about them. Theresa laughed again, the sound echoing across the valley that would soon be her home. No train stations, she agreed, just you, me, and our future together. They stayed on the ridge until the valley was silver with moonlight, talking of their plans, their dreams, the life they would build together. When they finally rode back to town, Theresa's heart was so full she thought it might burst. Mrs. Peterson was the first to hear their news, squealing with delight and immediately beginning to plan the wedding breakfast. Mayor Tanner offered the town hall for the reception, and Mrs. Harrington promised that the Ladies' Aid Society would provide decorations and refreshments. As summer progressed, Theresa divided her time between teaching, wedding preparations, and learning the basics of ranch management from Jack. She discovered she had a knack for bookkeeping, helping him organize the ranch accounts more efficiently than they'd ever been. Jack, meanwhile, began renovations on his ranch house, adding a proper library for Theresa's books, expanding the kitchen, and building a covered porch where they could sit in the evenings and watch the sunset over their land. They decided to build a small schoolhouse on the ranch property for the children of their workers and neighboring ranches, where Theresa could teach part-time while managing her duties as a rancher's wife. The town council reluctantly accepted her resignation, but brightened when she offered to help train her replacement, a young woman from Denver who would arrive in August. As September approached, Theresa found herself reflecting on the incredible journey that had brought her to this point. One afternoon, while sorting through her trunk, she came across Thomas's crumpled note, the one he'd left her at the train station. She hadn't looked at it since that day, too painful a reminder of her humiliation. Now she smoothed it out, reading his hurried words. Theresa, I cannot go through with this. We want different things from life. You deserve someone who loves you completely. I'm sorry. Thomas, for the first time, Theresa felt a wave of gratitude toward the man who had abandoned her. His cowardice had led her to Sweetwater Junction, to a life more fulfilling than any she could have imagined in San Francisco, to a love deeper and truer than what they had shared. She was still holding the note when Jack knocked at her door. Everything all right? He asked, seeing her thoughtful expression. Theresa handed him the note. I found this while packing. Jack read it quickly, his brow furrowing. Are you upset? No, Theresa said, surprising herself with the truth of it. I'm grateful. If he hadn't left me, I never would have met you. Never would have found this life that I love so much. Jack's face softened. He pulled her into his arms, holding her close. Then I'm grateful to him too, though I still think he's a fool for letting you go. His loss is my gain, Theresa murmured against his chest. Their wedding day dawned clear and bright, a perfect September morning with just a hint of autumn crispness in the air. Theresa, dressed in her new wedding gown, made by the town dressmaker from ivory silk with delicate lace trim. It was simpler than the elaborate dress she'd worn at the train station, but far more suited to her new life and the woman she had become. Mrs. Peterson helped arrange her hair, weaving wildflowers into the soft curls. You look radiant, my dear, the older woman said, tears in her eyes. Jack won't know what hit him. The small church was filled to capacity with townsfolk and ranchers from the surrounding area. Jack waited at the altar, handsome in a new black suit, his face lighting up as Theresa walked down the aisle on Mayor Tanner's arm. Their vows were simple but heartfelt. Jack's voice was steady as he promised to love, honor, and cherish her all the days of his life. Theresa's eyes shimmered with happy tears as she pledged herself to him in return. I now pronounce you husband and wife, the minister declared. You may kiss your bride. Jack's kiss was tender and reverent, a promise of the life they would share. The congregation erupted in cheers and applause as they turned to face their friends and neighbors as Mr. and Mrs. Jackson O'Malley. The reception at the town hall was a joyous affair, with music, dancing, and enough food to feed the entire county. Jack and Theresa moved among their guests, accepting congratulations and well wishes from everyone from the bank president to the blacksmith's apprentice. As evening approached, they slipped away to begin the journey to Jack's now-their ranch. The wagon was decorated with ribbons and flowers, with tin cans tied to the back that clattered merrily as they drove. "Happy, Mrs. O'Malley?" Jack asked as the town receded behind them. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Theresa replied, leaning against his shoulder. "And you, Mr. O'Malley, I have everything I ever wanted," he said simply, pressing a kiss to her temple. "A beautiful wife, good land, and a future full of promise." They fell silent as the wagon rolled toward home, both contemplating the journey that had brought them together and the lifetime that stretched before them, a lifetime of seasons on the land, of children's laughter, of challenges faced together, of love deepening with each passing year. As the sun set behind the western mountains, painting the sky in the same brilliant colors Theresa had seen the day she arrived in Sweetwater Junction, she remembered Jack's words at the train station. "Your journey ends in my arms." He had been right in a way. Her journey as a heartbroken, abandoned bride had ended that day. But a new journey, richer, truer, and infinitely more wonderful, had just begun. 5 years later, Theresa stood on the porch of their ranch house, watching Jack teach their 4-year-old son James to ride his pony in the fenced yard. Their 2-year-old daughter Rose played at her feet, stacking wooden blocks Jack had carved for her last Christmas. The ranch had prospered under their joint management. Jack's innovative breeding programs and Theresa's meticulous bookkeeping had turned the O'Malley Ranch into one of the most successful operations in the territory. The small schoolhouse they'd built now served 12 children from neighboring ranches, with Theresa teaching 3 days a week. Sweetwater Junction had grown too, becoming an important rail hub with new businesses opening every month. Mrs. Peterson still ran her boarding house, though she now had help from her niece who had moved west to teach at the expanded town school. Mayor Tanner had been re-elected twice, largely on the strength of the town's economic growth. "Mama, look," James called, his face alight with pride as he guided his pony around the yard without his father's hand on the reins. "Well done, sweetheart." Theresa called back, her heart swelling with love for her family. Jack looked up at her, his smile as warm and true as it had been the day they met. Despite the years of hard work, of midnight feedings and ranch emergencies, of occasional disagreements and the everyday challenges of building a life together, their love had only deepened with time. As the sun began to set, painting the valley in gold just as it had the night Jack proposed, Theresa reflected on the strange twists of fate that had brought her here. The abandoned bride at the train station seemed like someone from another lifetime, a woman she barely recognized now. Jack came to join her on the porch, lifting Rose into his arms as James continued to practice his riding. "Penny for your thoughts," he said, echoing the phrase that had become their personal shorthand over the years. "I was just thinking about how perfect my life is," Theresa replied, leaning into his side, "and how it all started with the worst day of my life." Jack wrapped his free arm around her, pulling her close. "I've always believed everything happens for a reason," he said, "even the painful things." "Especially the painful things," Theresa agreed, watching their son's determined face as he guided his pony through a turn. "They lead us where we're meant to be if we're brave enough to keep going." Later that night, with the children asleep and the ranch quiet under a blanket of stars, Jack and Theresa sat on their porch swing, sharing a glass of wine and the comfortable silence of a couple who knew each other's thoughts without words. "I got a letter from San Francisco today," Jack mentioned casually. "From that cattle buyer I met at the Denver stock show." "Oh," Theresa raised an eyebrow. "What did he want?" "Invited us to bring a herd to the California market next spring, said prices are better than Denver." Jack took a sip of his wine. "Thought we might make a trip of it, take the children, see the ocean, maybe even visit that fancy hotel you always wanted to stay in." Theresa laughed softly. "The Palace Hotel, I'd almost forgotten about that. It was part of the honeymoon Thomas had planned." Too painful a reminder, Jack asked, always sensitive to her feelings. Not at all, Theresa assured him, squeezing his hand. That was a different life, a different me. She smiled at the thought of showing her children the ocean, of standing with Jack on a California beach with the endless Pacific before them. I think it's a wonderful idea, a new adventure for the O'Malleys. Jack's answering smile was filled with love and the promise of all the years to come. To new adventures, he said, raising his glass. To new adventures, Theresa echoed, and the journey that never really ends. As they sat together under the Wyoming stars, Theresa thought about the words that had changed her life that day at the train station. Your journey ends in my arms, Jack had said. But he had been wrong about one thing. In his arms, her journey hadn't ended, it had truly begun, and what a glorious, unexpected, perfect journey it had turned out to be.